Good morning, brother, and welcome to another of our devotionals. Last time we were looking at Psalm 26 and thinking of those words of the psalmist where he says, "Your steadfast love is before my eyes, and I walk in faithfulness to you." What does walking in faithfulness to God look like? Well, in verses 4 and 5, we have an example of what it looks like. He says, "I do not sit with men of falsehood, nor do I consort with hypocrites. I hate the assembly of evildoers, and I will not sit with the wicked." Living life in obedience to God will affect the company we keep. The psalmist knew that the people he spent most of his time with would be the people who would influence him the most. Knowing that God had called him to be a man of truth, to be a man of integrity, he determined not to spend his time in the company of men of falsehood, people who were deceitful and whose word you couldn't trust. Because he was called by God to be a man of integrity, he would not spend a lot of his time, certainly not choose to spend his time, in the company of those who were hypocrites. Knowing that God had called him to a life of righteousness, he did not choose as his best friends, and thus he did not spend an inordinate amount of time with those whose lives were marked by sin, wickedness, and evil. Put quite simply, this man was careful about the company he kept. Why? Because he knew only too well how influential in his life were the people with whom he spent most of his time. You see, the person who hangs out with people who, for example, regularly use bad language will discover that it won't be long before they themselves are using similar language. The people that we hang out with, if they are people who blaspheme the name of God, will result in us, like them, blaspheming the name of God. If you spend an inordinate amount of time with people who have very loose or even no morals, you will end up being like them. Sin is very contagious, and to choose to spend lots of one's time in the company of sinners leads to us becoming more sinful in our speech, in our behaviour, in our attitudes. You remember the words of the first psalm: "Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the way of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers." In 1 Corinthians 15:33, Paul writes, "Bad company corrupts good character." You see, brethren, our choice of friends, our choice of who we choose to spend our time with, our choice of where we go to relax, and those with whom we mingle, these things impact upon our spiritual lives. To deliberately choose to hang out with the unsaved, to spend lots of our leisure time in the company of unbelievers, will inevitably have a detrimental impact upon our spiritual lives. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we are to completely isolate ourselves from unbelievers. We're not called by God to live some monk-like existence. We're meant to be salt and light in the world, and that means that there's times when we are to be in the company of the unsaved. But in the company of the unsaved, we're meant to witness to them, not to become like them. We're not to become best friends with unsaved people. Such company will not have a sanctifying influence on our life. If anything, it will have a corrupting influence. That's why in time that we have free, time that we would call leisure time, we are to spend it in the company of believers. Choose well, brethren, with whom you spend your free time. The psalmist says, I will not sit with men of falsehood. I will not consort with hypocrites. I hate the assembly, the gatherings of evildoers, and I will not sit with the wicked. May God help us to be wise in those with whom we choose to spend our time. Have a good day.